Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joe Newmeyer, creative producer here at the Sarasota Film Festival. Thank you so much for coming to our very special career conversation today. Our guest today has brought a myriad of women's viewpoints and stories to television and film and stage, amazingly over 30 years. She constantly beguiles us and draws us in with her talent and her ability to convey emotion. I'm very proud to present this year's recipient of the Sarasota Film Festival's Career Tribute Award, ladies and gentlemen, Anne Heche.
Thank you, Joe, for that beautiful introduction.
You're so welcome. Thanks for being here, Anne.
Thank you.
That Coke looks good, by the way.
Do you want some?
No, that's okay. I'll get one after.
I can share. Anybody else want some?
We've got so much to talk about. Like I mentioned, almost 30 years or so.
I know, I feel so young.
Career, which is amazing. But 1989, 90 is when you started on Another World on television.
Thank you. I have my twins come with me. They travel with me in my bag.
Which is amazing, and I'm wondering. I mean, at such a young age to be on a soap like that and to win an Emmy Award for it, were there lessons you learned from doing a soap opera that you still carry with you as you're doing film and television and stage? Lessons from the soap opera days.
Oh, for sure. I mean, one of the miracles of my life, I always feel like I've had angels that are brought into it. Another World was incredible for me because I was raised very poor. We didn't have a television. I was not a very educated person about pop culture. And when I got to Chicago, I moved from Atlantic City. I got to Chicago, I was given a scholarship to a school that I didn't even know was a possibility. It was a school when I was wandering around the halls looking that I stopped and a woman came up to me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I got to go to school in a week." And she said, "Well, this is a private school." And I said, "I don't know what's private or not private about it, but I got to go to school. What does private mean?" And she said, "It means you pay." And I said, "Oh, no, I don't have any money. I just have to go to school." And that woman beautifully brought me into the school and gave me a scholarship, which saved my life. And in 10th grade, I was doing a play called The Skin of Our Teeth, Thornton Wilder play. And a woman, a casting director, was snowed in, came to our school because that's where Daryl Hannah went, and happened to see me in the play and came up to me afterwards and said, "Would you be interested in auditioning for a soap?" And I said, "Sure, what's a soap?" And she took me to New York, and 2 years later, I did not take the job because I didn't want to move with my mother. 2 years later, they came back, asked me to play twins on Another World, and then I moved the day after I graduated. From that moment on, I, first of all, understood that there were some things called sets, which I didn't understand, that you didn't just shoot in a house. It wasn't Vicki and Marley Love's house. It's like, what's going on? You can shoot there and there and there and there. But in the journey of a soap opera, one, you just learn so much about learning lines. And on a soap opera, because you shoot so much every day, it doesn't matter how you say them. As long as they spit out of your mouth, they move on. And that became my way of understanding how to experiment. And then I was given another character, and I experimented with her too. So I was good all day long, and then I was bad all day long, and after lunch. And the work ethic on soap opera is very unique. But the other thing that you asked is, what else did I take with me? One is the spirit of a community, because when you are doing and shooting so much in a day, you might as well have a good time while you're doing it, and the crew became a very big support for me and family, so that carried with me through movies and everything else. And the other was that you have to do your job. You have to do, as long as you do your job, you have freedom to explore. And an actor's job, I always say I'm a plumber, really, and I just kind of start moving down the assembly line. What do you need fixed? Okay, here I come. What are my lines? I know. What's my costume? I'll put that on. They spit me out the end of the assembly line. I say my words, get a paycheck. Other than that, it's the experimentation and the fun and the joy of expressing emotion, relationship, play. And because on a soap opera, they'll take anything you do. You get to make all the mistakes that you want and hopefully kind of hone some kind of a skill.
Yeah, I love that.
Hopefully I've taken that with me. Thank you for reminding me for 30 years.
I've read or I've heard that there is obviously like there's such a level of communication that the actors need to have on a soap opera. You've got to obviously be aware of next lines coming up and everything, but there is sort of this sense
Not
of
everybody.
Not everybody, right? But there is that right, but maybe that goes to it. If somebody doesn't have it, you're like, I need to have some interaction here. We need to be in this scene together, and in a way that maybe is very unique to the performance style. I think that's interesting.
Well, for me, people came from Juilliard, which again, I said I didn't know what private school was, but Juilliard apparently pay a lot of money to figure out how to be an actor, and I was on a soap opera figuring out how to be an actor, and the ones over from Juilliard who came to play my boyfriends and sisters and stuff like that. But I was like, this is soap opera, so way beneath me. And I was like, excuse me, I'm getting paid. You might know Shakespeare. Get out of my way. Say your lines. Sorry if they're not written in poetry, but say your lines. I got some work to do.
Well, working was your school, which I love that, being a working actress. And then, I'm going to rattle off 2 or 3 things that you did right after that, which is amazing to me. So obviously you did Murphy Brown with an episode of Murphy Brown with Candace Bergen, did Oh Pioneers with Jessica Lange. You worked for James L. Brooks for I'll Do Anything, which is an underappreciated movie. I really like that film.
It was supposed to be a musical. Did you know that?
I did know that. And I got to cut it all out, but that's what I think is fascinating about it too, because you can see the rhythms in it, even as a non-musical. And then you worked with John Goodman on a film about Huey Long. I'm wondering if, in kind of quick succession on that kind of stuff, did you learn sort of a different kind of language, the film language, a different kind of television language that you kind of carry with you?
Yes, when you're working in a place like New Orleans or Sarasota, take a lot of changes of T-shirts because you're going to sweat through them. John Goodman and I had a good time with that, trying to peel off his clothes in between takes because he was so sweaty all the time.
He's great, right?
What was the question? I started thinking of sweaty people.
Because moving from, and it's kind of warm today actually, moving from soap operas to television and film, it's like there is this sort of different style. There's a different film language that I think that actors and actresses maybe need to acclimate themselves to in some ways, right?
Well, Oh Pioneers was the first movie. I was going to go to Parsons School of Design or to the soap because I figured I don't know what I'm doing still. You would think after doing like 500 episodes of television it would sink in. But if anyone was there last night, I was always very shy about any impact that I had had anywhere. And people were like, what are you talking about? You're quitting the show to go to Parsons? Like, what are you talking about? And I happened to be reading a book that my producer had given me before I left. She handed me, I was leaving the soap and she handed me a book. I was like, what's this? Because I'd always had scripts. She's like, it's a novel. I'm like, I don't do those. She said, no. It's called Oh Pioneers. That weekend I happened to get a call saying they want you to go and audition for a movie with Jessica Lange. And I said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to Parsons. And they said, well, it's called Oh Pioneers.
Wow. And
none of them knew that I, of course, was holding that book, and where I've always been a person who pays attention to the doors that are open, come hell or high water. I was like, oh, shoot, I guess I'm being told something. Yeah. And I went down to do Oh Pioneers. It was a beautiful Hallmark movie. And we went, I finished up the show, and I went down to have the cast dinner and was sitting next to Jessica Lange. First of all, unbelievable to be able to have the bounty of my life, starting with, of course, the most gorgeous, incredible woman, Jessica Lange, and I couldn't believe I was meeting her. And I was like, I'm just so thrilled to meet you. And she said, don't talk, I don't even know how, I don't even know what to do. I have 7 pages I'm supposed to do tomorrow, and I don't know how I'm supposed to do them. I don't know how people do these kind of TV movie things, and I just memorized for about maybe at least 2 years of my life, 60 pages of dialogue a day. Wow. And I said, oh, that's really funny, because I don't know how you're going to do 7. I'm like, what are we going to do after 8 o'clock in the morning, you know? And she and I got along beautifully. It's a very different art to go from one to the next, more so based on how many pages of dialogue you get to do. And then she proceeded to tell me, I said, well, anything else? And she said, well, start a character from the outside in. I always start with my wig and go to my clothes, which I have now learned is the less we have to act, the better. And she says that's where she starts. She's always reminded in every reflection. She can see the character that she's playing. And I said, well, how is Tootsie? Like, can I just hear a story? She said, Tootsie's so funny. I won the Oscar for the Tootsie. You know why? I just started going out with Sam, and all I wanted to do was get back to my dressing room and see if he called me on the phone to the back. So all I did was act as fast as I possibly could to the end of the scene, and I could leave to see if the man who was the love in my life had called me. So that was probably one of my better tricks of acting that I've learned.
right.
Just hope that the phone is ringing on the other end and get
Right.
off the set.
I hope that Sam Shepard's calling. Exactly. Well, I love that because that
Who I've
also.
done a movie with, by the way.
That's
He
right.
ended up
That's right.
calling me.
That's right. What I love about that is that sort of speaks to using everything in your toolbox, whether it's something that's going on that day, something you're recalling from a previous job, to make that current job the best as it can be.
You just keep filling up the container, you know?
Yeah.
Every part has its different container and boundaries of the upper and the down. Why I usually start with figuring out how, first of all, what I'm trying to say with the character, what's the point of it?
Yeah.
And then that becomes a destination of just building what it is, what it means. I mean, in a movie right now, Best of Enemies, and my character is the head of the KKK's wife. And that's out right now, this movie.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful movie. It's Taraji Henson and Sam Rockwell.
Yeah.
And about the schools that were desegregated in the South in '71. And to understand the container, it's like you begin with, well, I want to play a character who truly loves the head of the KKK.
Yeah.
Now, that's not something that necessarily goes along with Anne's instinct.
Do
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you want to explore what is
Yeah.
that, and then that
Yeah.
begins the container. Well, hold on, what does love mean? And then I start kind of going through what that is, what that process would be. Well, what would that look like then? How does love shine through a person in that particular arena? What are her bottom? What is her highs? What are her lows? And each thing has its different container, but what flows through it is all of the things that I've learned, all the people that I've seen, all the compassion that I feel, all the drama that I've seen. How do you start flowing through a character these beliefs? So everything that you collect is a part of it, but it's not necessarily like, well, I'm going to play the head of the KKK's wife and tap dance too, because I just learned that last week. You keep that one out, you know, and flow through with your emotional space.
Yeah. We'll be talking about that towards the end, obviously, as we're kind of going chronologically, but I love that you jumped ahead to that because there is sort of something about Best of Enemies being in theaters right now. There's an immediacy, obviously, to that motion, and you never know as you're doing a project what's going to resonate when and how and who it's going to resonate with. We were talking about this the other night. Like, you don't know how those stories that you're telling are going to resonate with people. And
you don't know how this is going to resonate
That's
with
right.
people.
That's
So
right.
it's
No, no,
silly.
right.
You don't know how characters are going to resonate. That's not how you can do it. You can
That's-
kind of just be present and
That's right.
hope that somewhere along the way somebody's nice
Yeah.
enough, Joe, to tell me that something mattered along the way.
Yeah. Well, speaking of matters, one of my favorite indie films from the 90s is Walking and Talking from 1996. It's an extraordinary film. Yeah, let's give it a round of applause. Absolutely. And a couple of years ago, now about 2 years ago, there was a story written, and I'm just going to quote the beginning of it, which is that now that film feels like a prophecy about the kinds of women who are in charge of pop culture, who rule pop culture now. And what that sort of means is you can look back to that film and you can see the roots of so many voices that are speaking now and so many viewpoints that are being told. What was it like working with Nicole Holofcener, a female writer-director, at that time in your life? It must have been so important, right?
I don't think I understood the importance of that. And I didn't know much about pop culture. That was in a very beginning part of my relationship. I loved that there was a woman who was doing something, but that was so unique. Because even back then, back in the old days, there weren't very many female directors.
Yeah.
So, but again, that didn't click in or register very much. It was just a beautiful, story about these friendships and what that meant. It was a very intimate movie. It wasn't, and that's probably one of the beginning moments that you're talking about. We're just telling the story, just real life interaction. It didn't have to be bigger than life. It was just a very kind of intimate tale of this woman who was trying to get married and be okay with it, which we still haven't solved that problem. But the more movies will be made. I think one of the fun things about how different moments kind of affect different parts of your life. Of course, Catherine Keener was the lead of that movie, and a few years later, and I know this was one of the clips that was shown last night. So, and it's just interesting because you would ask me when we talked about something that I find very funny about what people respond to, what they react, what the perception of things are. Because a few years later, I got Donnie Brasco, and I went. Mike Newell was the director, and I went and I did the audition, and that's where they put you in front of a camera and you audition. You hope you get a call back to go play Johnny Depp's wife, And I ran into Catherine Keener at a coffee shop or whatever, and she was like, "Oh, I heard that you were auditioning for Donnie Brasco," and I said, "I did. I don't know if I got the accent right." She said, "What accent?" And I said, you know, you did the accent, the New Jersey accent. And she goes, they're from Florida. And I was like, oh, uh-oh. And I said, well, I guess I should do a Florida accent for my screen test. She said, oh, you're doing a screen test and you did a New Jersey accent? I didn't get a screen test. I did a Florida one. I was like, I don't know what that says about you, but anyway, my plumber did it with the Jersey accent, and I went to Mike Newell. I was so completely embarrassed. And you had asked me the other night how long it took me to learn that accent. And I didn't. I just heard it, and I go into Mike Newell, and I'm screen testing. I said, I'm so sorry. Like, I guess she's from Florida. And he said, did Catherine Keener get the call back? You're doing the test. Keep the New Jersey accent. And it stayed.
Yeah.
And the thing that's interesting about that is the listening of the wisdom that you have when you start building your confidence as an actor. So you start listening to what the story is and what it sounds like. And even though the container might have all of these strict boundaries given to you, it's not, that's why I say ignorance is bliss for a lot of my career, because it allowed me to listen and tune in, and it's become a lesson that I've taken with me, hopefully also in my life. How do we tune in? How do we tune into the thing that we know that is actually the exact opposite, or even a mistake from what somebody else said? You did it absolutely wrong. Story of my life. Did it absolutely wrong, but it was executed in a way that meant and felt something that was unique enough to deliver what it was that became the roles that I've been given in all my life.
That's amazing. I love that. And you're so great at segues, because obviously talking about Donnie Brasco, that accent is part and parcel of that character's heart. And something about that in watching that film again, obviously Johnny Depp's amazing in it, Al Pacino's amazing in it, you're amazing in it, but what you are is the heart. You are sort of the heart of that movie, because these guys are going through these other things. You have to represent what he's giving up, what Depp's character as an FBI informant with the mob is turning his back on, and part of that is this another world that he is not that he's turning away from, and that's what that accent is part of. That's what the whole performance is part of. It's really extraordinary. Yeah. I mean, when you look back at that film, does it feel like that was sort of a turning point? Because things obviously were Wag the Dog. We're going to segue to in a moment, but things were getting much bigger for you at that point. That's a crucial movie for you, isn't it? Donnie Brasco.
Well, I think so. And again, my ignorance is such that I didn't really understand. Like, forgive me, didn't know who Johnny Depp was.
It was still early for him, though, in a lot of ways.
But there are things, there are ways that really helped me. And what that did more than anything was when I arrived at the table to do the reading of Wag the Dog, and I thought I was going to play waitress 1, 2, and 3 to Hoffman and De Niro. Barry Levinson, who was a producer on Donnie Brasco, who I had never met, had seen my performance and asked me to come in and do a reading, and said, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to read Ames. And Ames was the third male lead in the movie. I was like, that's a man, first of all. And he said, I know, and that's what I want you to read, but I hadn't prepped it. And I was like, and then here comes in Hoffman, and then here comes in De Niro, and I'm supposed to be their sidekick, really, was what I was. And that, so what it did was that each one of the things that I did, I had these, again, angels who recognized something in me and pushed me further than I even knew was a possibility, and that's what really started changing. The wheels started changing when Levinson did something that hadn't been done before, which is to give a Mamet male to a chick who didn't even know who Mamet was, and put her in between two of the most extraordinary actors of all time. So that was, that made people's eyes open a little bit to me.
That's an amazing thing, right? That's a David Mamet script. I just want to close the chapter on Donnie Brasco quickly by just noting that it is still noted as one of the great mobster movies. It's like right up there with The Goodfellas and The Godfather. It's like when people rank those movies, Donnie Brasco's right up there. Wag the Dog it's funny that you thought that you were going to be a waitress with these guys, because in fact you are the first lines in the film. You are our way in. Ames is the character who's sort of the linchpin, because she is the one who is watching as a crass Hollywood producer and a political operative played by Hoffman and De Niro try and machinate a political distraction from a presidential scandal, and watching you in that film, you can really feel the thrum. The clip that we showed last night at the awards, where she is watching them do their stuff. It's extraordinary. The way you kind of feel the tension in the room, and the way you kind of cross over from both astounded at what they're doing and part of it. is great, right? Like there's a fluidity to that character. There is a you're in on it, but you're also shocked at what they're doing, right?
I always said it was like the drum set, and when you're looking at Hoffman and De Niro, they could not have more. First of all, I do understand what a big deal that is to say that I've worked with both of those people and talked to them like they're my friends. Yeah. Those guys, when you're working with them, they have two very different styles. Yeah. The day that I learned how you talking to me, you talking to me, you talking to me, how that all came out in Taxi Driver,
yeah,
driving Miss Daisy crazy.
Taxi Driver, that's right. Taxi Driver, yeah.
When you're on set with De Niro, that's the thing. He'll do it. Yeah. He knows all of his lines. Like you don't waste any time with Bob. He comes on, he shoots. That's it. You're done. You're out. He will finish a day before lunch. It's like that's it. But he'll say and repeat a line until you start to feel, and I would be like, God, watch him. And then I'd talk. As soon as I knew that he could, I clicked into like the way that he wanted to say a line. Hoffman, the exact opposite. He likes to say it all the way through. Couldn't stand that Bob would repeat his lines. Couldn't oh my fun. And I would hold that off and hold that off. So it's funny how, again, interpretation has something to do with it, because really what I was doing that whole time was making sure Dustin was kind of distracted enough to where I could hear Bob enough to understand when Dustin could snap in, because otherwise De Niro would get pissed off. And so it has, I'm and then so all of that was about the interpretation of really when I felt like I was just hitting the cymbals once in a while, making sure they didn't fight.
It's very jazz-like. It's like a jazz-like interpretation, and there's and a playfulness. I love that. And talking about style, then obviously 6 Days, 7 Nights is you're working with Harrison Ford in a film that I really, and you heard in the reaction from people last night when that clip came on, that it's a film that Ivan Reitman directed. It's got it's beautiful. You're on an island with Harrison Ford, but there is a particular kind of old-fashioned playfulness to that film. It is like a film from the 40s or 50s that's got so much style and panache to it. What was it like working with Harrison on that? Should we set it up a little bit? That you're a powerful magazine. If anybody hasn't seen it, powerful magazine editor.
I don't want to make anybody jealous.
You're a powerful magazine editor, and he is Quinn, the rough pilot.
I'm working with a man in a movie right now. You don't want to talk too much about other leading men when you're working with a leading man. Working with Thomas Jane on a movie called Hour of Lead.
All right, Thomas Jane. There's.
What did he say? What did he say?
I'm in love with Harrison too.
Okay, so I can say the extraordinary thing again about that movie and so many things about timing in my life. Yeah. That was a movie of old-fashioned, beautiful, written to be beautiful, romantic comedy. Yeah. And the 2 days before I met Harrison on Sunday night, just to give you a bit of a timeline, I met Ellen DeGeneres at a Vanity Fair party on Sunday night. And she was coming out obviously was on the cover of Time magazine. If you don't know the story, was coming out nationally on her show called Ellen on Tuesday night, the morning after I met Harrison. And Wednesday was my Volcano press junket, and Thursday night was my Volcano premiere. So it was a packed, not everybody's week.
It's a busy week, right?
And on Tuesday, there's an amazing story about why I like spending so much time with Harrison. But Star Wars was the very first movie I was ever allowed to see in theaters. Ah. And my family was very poor, and we were living in New Jersey, and we made popcorn and stuffed it into our jackets to be able to sit in the front row and hide. And we made pizza burgers, which is really like it wasn't the stuffed tuna casserole we were used to, and it was like this amazing event in my life to be able to see Harrison Ford on screen. Yeah. And after I got the script, I called my agents. I was like, I can do this with my eyes closed. Who's the guy? And they're like, Harrison Ford. I'm like, why'd you send it to me? I'm like, obviously not going to get this movie. And they said, well, you're meeting him on Tuesday morning. Right. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday morning now, I've fallen in love with Ellen DeGeneres. Apparently she's gay and coming out on national television. Didn't know she had a TV show. Did not understand that I was a star big enough to even meet with Harrison Ford. But decided I'm going to go meet him anyway and walk into the room with him, and Ivan Reitman just blurt out, oh my God, you're the first guy I ever saw in a movie. I love you, and I know I'll never get this movie, but you're amazing, and you were my first. And he's like, and he looks at me, he goes, don't ever tell that story again.
In that Harrison Ford voice.
He goes, who are you? And I said, I'm Anne Heche. And he looked at Ivan and said, well, she's more interesting than most.
Great. What a great story. What a great... It wraps it all together. I don't know how to top that. Talking about leading men, Vince Vaughn, you did a couple of movies with Vince Vaughn in a row, which both of them are very interesting. One, of course, is Psycho, and the other one is Return to Paradise. I want to talk about Return to Paradise briefly.
That came first.
Yes, Return to Paradise came first because you capture something. You play a high-powered lawyer who's trying to get Joaquin Phoenix out of jail, and the power and the sort of the dynamic quality you bring to that performance is really terrific. It's a film that I think people are expecting it to be one thing, sort of a little like Midnight Express or something, and it's in fact another thing. It's about the wheels of justice sort of cranking and trying to get him to do the right thing for his friend. What was it like approaching that role? Because that's a different kind of a role for you. That was very high-powered, kind of fast, intense.
I always like when roles are written where they make me feel smarter, and that feels like the ladder I have to climb.
Yeah.
Like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Do they know that I didn't go to college? There are still those insecurities at that time. Now I don't have them. Like, who cares? Everybody knows anyways that I'm not bright. The key to that movie, of course, is how an intellect can, and I wasn't that specific now, but looking back, being asked to look at what it was. The challenge of that is how does an intellect transform a human's heart into a life or death situation they're willing to risk death. That means that there needs to be an emotional connection. That if I had been that clear, that movie probably would have been better. But that was part of it, and also then in return is what she's experiencing, which is the rawness of a person who's facing that life or death situation. It ignites a truth in her that she falls in love with, regardless of whether or not she agrees with it. Similar to what I was saying with the KKK. It wasn't about. She is brought to an emotional place with a human being who can't follow the rules that she has, can't follow the things, all of this logic. It's her brother. She has all of these arguments, a lawyer, all of these arguments for why he should be doing something. And yet in that, they strip away each other's what we should do's and who we are's and nots, and levels the playing field, which becomes love, and that is kind of where the heart of that movie I think was.
Yeah, no, it's an extraordinary performance. It really is. And then comes Psycho, which takes so much courage. The iconic role of Marion Crane that you did not really see the movie until very late.
The day after I met Gus, thank God, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Right. I mean, and what was it? I mean, you must have had a level of trepidation, but it's an amazing experiment to do that film shot for shot, and it's a classic film. And you guys, you pull it off. It's what it is it's an experimentation about how it's the singer, not the song, and interpretations are always interesting, right?
Well, look at theater. I mean, but the hilarious thing is, and people were so offended that he was remaking Psycho. It's like every performance on Broadway is a performance that's already been done by somebody else. Unless you're, I mean, revivals, Jesus Christ, if they shot down people who did the remake of Oklahoma, we'd be dead. I mean, come on. And then it's like, we're doing Psycho. Like, no, because it's on film, you can't do it. Like, why?
Yeah. Exactly.
So that was odd that he got so much flack for it. But in another way, like, we arrived on set, and on the boards, there would be every single shot that Hitchcock did. And so in a way, it was a relief. I mean, for us, it was a game to fit into the frame that was already set, and where Vince and I did it, which became so interesting. It became a craft in how specific you could be, that your personality was going to be different. We were going to be different person. We weren't mimicking the actors or the characters. We were mimicking the behavior in the frame. So the behavior would be, even if we stepped, so Vince and I but it was just fun. But when Marion stepped out of the car and took her first step, the first step that would be on camera would be the same as the step that she had done on camera. It became that specific for us. So that the personality was really coming through a different part of it that was already engaged in a physical container, and that was fun. But Gus, I thought it was beautiful. I thought the interpretation of seeing character come out of such specific frame was so fascinating. I didn't understand why it was. I don't understand much.
I think it's actually, in some ways, it's almost like a fascinating game of time travel. I mean, to kind of step, it's the closest you can get to actually stepping inside of the 1960 film. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, he only did one thing that Hitchcock didn't do, and it was with the eye when she dies and she's on the ground in the eye. That was actually the trickiest part. How do I keep my eye open? Because if I couldn't do it, it's weird how you have to train certain parts of your bodies for different roles. It wasn't like I was learning how to be a ballerina. I would just sit in my bed at night like this. and just try to keep it open. Because the step that he didn't do, that Hitchcock couldn't do, was go from her eye out the window. He didn't have the technology to do it, and Gus had studied it in college, which is why he was doing the remake. And he needed to be able to go off my eye, which meant I needed to keep my eye open longer than that bitch did. No, I'm kidding. To be able to carry it off.
Yeah.
And so that was the only shot that he changed.
That's amazing. And you mentioned theater. You're so great on these segues, and how obviously theater is constantly interpretations. You do your first Broadway play shortly after that with Proof. What was that like, being on the Broadway stage?
There was a guy here who brought the playbill, and that was so sweet. I don't know how. It was so funny to see that he had the playbill.
And you got great reviews for that because it was a different interpretation of that character, and it was sort of a sense of we kind of got to see this play from a slightly different point of view. And what was it like attacking that role?
Well, do you know what Proof? I mean, maybe you.
Sure. Proof is about the daughter of a dead mathematician and scientist who he died of. He had a madness to him, and she is worried that she will kind of deal with the same madness in her life.
No, everybody else is worried that she's dealing with the same madness,
Okay.
and there has been a proof that she wrote that people are saying was her father's.
Okay. I didn't see the play.
Clearly.
You got me on that one. Yeah.
There was a movie. There was a movie made.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a 4-character play, and it is. And the father comes back in the first scene. The girl comes out. She's a reckless, but she lives in her father's house in the middle of the woods, and is a person. She's a genius. She's a math genius. And her father's dead, and they open the play with her talking to her father, and who comes back as a ghost. And the thing is, there's a proof that's revealed, and she's written it, and everybody who's getting their hands on the proof believes that it was either A, her father's proof, or B, that she's crazy. And so through the whole play, she's experiencing this, this belief and this horror and dismissiveness of her talent, because of A, her past, but also that they don't believe that this 25-year-old would have this kind of ability. And they are calling her crazy. And funnily enough, at that moment in my life, I knew about that very closely. And I thought that's hilarious, because when you're not crazy and people call you crazy, the drama around it is so ridiculous. But really all you're doing is going, but I have proof that I'm not crazy. And what's your problem?
Yeah.
So I thought it was very funny how people would interpret that play, especially actresses, when they get to play something that's called crazy or loony. It gives all this opportunity to go tap dance around the stage and be all this nutty stuff. Yeah. But the fact was, she wasn't crazy. Yeah. So I was like, why would you ever play play like she's crazy? Everybody else is crazy. Yeah. So I interpreted it as a comedy, and that is not what Proof was written to be. But to me, it was really funny, because I was going through the same thing, wrote a book called Call Me Crazy. People did. If I knew that people were going to do what I said, I would have said, call me sane. Yeah. And do what I say, by the way. So I was, facing that. Yeah. And thought it would be a real fun way to bring to light, and that's what happened. Yeah. That's what flipped the play, because what flipped it was into a comedy, and then we became the longest running Broadway show. It was going from 400 seats. Amazing what you do when you bring some sanity to a piece. Yeah. We went from like a 400 seat theater to a sellout in 900 seats for 9 months. Yeah, that's awesome. And it became a really cool way to tell people to shove it.
Very successful. And then, speaking of stage comedies, obviously something clicked, because you did 20th Century not long after that with Alec Baldwin, a role Carol Lombard played on screen. Mellon Kahn did it in a musical version in the 70s. It must have been so much fun to step into that, right? What was that like?
Unbelievable to go to Broadway with Alec. Again, it's another little savior in my life. My career wasn't going so swimmingly. Not everybody did jump on board with the She's Not Crazy bit. So it took me a little bit longer. But along the way, yes, of course, where everything comes to come into your life for a reason. So Alec, of course, kind of knew, and he's a little bit of a left-winger. So he was like, screw you guys, I can't believe you're not paying attention to the fact that Anne's an actress and screwball comedian, so I'm not going to do this play without her. And that also was a moment that changed the course of my life. I'd gone from Proof, and 20th Century became an entrance to a door that without Alec I would not have had, because he was my stamp of approval, and like everybody wants to have an opinion if somebody else has it first. He was the first, and then everybody kind of went along like, oh yeah, maybe, all right, fine, we'll watch her again.
Yeah. And as a quick note, you guys are going to be doing a reading of it at the end of the month,
Yeah,
right?
the 29th,
Yep.
we're doing a little one-night revival.
Which is fantastic. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I love Cedar Rapids from 2011, and I think
Thank you. Thanks for doing that clip. It's funny. I don't think people have many
it's
seen
really
that
it's a
movie.
phenomenal film. It's so sweethearted and it's terrific, and you play a character, Joan Ostrowski Fox, and there's a thing you do with your voice in there that I really want to sort of call out for a second because it's one of your talents. I think it's like you sort of do. There's this moment when you sort of, hey, in the insurance business, how'd you get in the insurance business? You say, and it's this playfulness and this level to character that you're able to bring, and that character in particular has got so many depths of feeling going on. What was it like working with, I mean, we talked the other day about John C. Reilly and how fantastic that performance is. What was it like being amongst all those guys in that phenomenal ensemble?
Well, dream come true.
Yeah,
We
right,
talked
yeah,
about
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
surrounded by
Yeah,
four of the
yeah.
greatest comedians of all time.
That's right.
I'm like, no, I like this
do
job.
that one, yeah.
I think John C. Reilly is one of the most outrageous. He just flies by the seat of his pants. He has such a freedom. And there is a difference between male and female comedians. I don't. Female actresses are not necessarily considered funny, and that's been part of the thing that has been a bit of a. You know, I've had to kind of nudge my way into that territory. It always says. I think it kind of more seems that people kind of brush it under the rug, like it's kind of accidental that I'm funny in a movie, but I'm not. I don't approach things through a joke persona, so I think that's been a little bit more difficult to interpret. So being able to get in there, Miguel Arteta was very beautiful to be able to see. He had seen proof, and I think saw that ability to bring in a kind of reality and truth to humor where he really needed, John C. Reilly played a character called Deansy, and if you haven't seen the movie, he's just this foul-mouthed. I mean, these are insurance people who go to like a not even a good enough Marriott, and there's like a pool in the center, and they just go there to get drunk and cheat on their husbands and wives. That's the kind of premise for this ridiculous film we did. But to be able to be the woman who's in the center of that, who's like around insurance salesmen all the time, and that it's her one moment to have freedom where she gets to leave her family, and that what she works so hard for every day, and how she finds her freedom is in these 3 days off with these rude, crude, crazy-ass other insurance salesmen. And that was a funny premise, and I'm thrilled that I got to do that because they're real women. I'm not a comedian in those different types, but I think women have a lot of personality, and I try to bring it out once in a while.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful way to put it because that character does sort of have this other, and Ed Helms, we should call out, is sort of the main character who kind of goes to this convention and meets these characters. But it's her perspective on it is very interesting. Her Joan's perspective on that scenario. Rampart is a very serious movie. Woody Harrelson, you and Cynthia Nixon are his ex-wives. You guys have a couple of crucial scenes, but there's this moment where you berate Woody Harrelson, who's a bad cop in Los Angeles. In a film directed by Oren Moverman, where you're saying you're a fraud, and it comes to this level of truth of truth telling. I think it's a phenomenal performance in a film that really like sort of caught a lot of edginess to both our culture at large and sort of just the way individuals sort of deal with stress. Right? What was it like coming to that performance? What was the key to that for you?
Well, it was a different Woody than I had worked with in the past.
That's right. And Wag the Dog. Right? That's right. Wag the Dog was the first time.
Yeah. Woody's in. I think I did another. When you get to have done lucky enough to do so many movies, you kind of forget along the way not who you've worked with, but how many times.
Yeah.
No, that was really amazing for Woody. He's similar. I think he and I like to go through different incarnations of ourselves, and once we've done a drama, we like to go and do something else. And Rampart really pushed him to a real dark side. So. When you're doing things like that, really those scenes that are written, which you get lucky enough to do, you're not on the whole movie. You come in and do a week's worth of work or whatever it is. I remember finding that character on an airplane. I just left New York. I was like, I forgot to find her. Where is she? I got to shoot tomorrow. When they move up your days when you can prep yourself, you're like, get it. Who is she?
Yeah.
But the clues in that are, especially when you're doing a smaller role, what are the clues he needs? Yeah. And then you can clue in and start filling up that container in a different way. Very specific things he needs. He needs to be called out on the truth. This is the opportunity to be able to do it. Ground her in what it is that he could have loved, right? It's an ex, and ground her in what she loved about him and why she would call him out. And so the puzzle pieces kind of had to go together more quickly, and also they go together more quickly the smaller the role is because you're there to serve as a story. You're not there to be go through, your changes
Yeah.
as a character,
Yeah.
and it's like you're there for a specific reason. And those become your clues to help. So it's nice to hear that back. I've never seen Rampart, but I'm glad it worked out.
Oh, it's worked out beautifully. It's a terrific film.
I found her on the plane. Maybe I should do that
Find her
more
on the plane,
often.
right? I'm going to go through a couple of TV titles because they're so crucial as well, and one obviously is still going on. But let's talk about Hung, which Thomas Jane, of course, was the star of Hung.
That
And
was
you
my
guys-
favorite.
And you guys worked on so beautifully. And in the sense of you are his ex-wife, that also was not the role originally that sort of was circulating in some ways for you, right? Or that you were thinking
I
of?
tested
Yeah.
for the one to be his,
his-
so he plays a male prostitute in the show, and I tested to be his a handler, I guess. and
Yeah.
He didn't want me to do it.
Yeah, yeah. But you work out so perfectly as his ex-wife because the two of you, your energy is such that you're sort of representing this part of his life that is no longer there, but you're reminding him of kind of keeping him kind of grounded in some ways. I mean, obviously it's a television show throughout the 3-4 seasons. It's like so much becomes revealed, but especially in that first season or two, you learn so much about him through you and through his relationship with his ex-wife.
I think you're giving me a lot of credit, Joe.
well,
Is it
you
because
deserve
I'm
it.
sitting up
No.
here? I really appreciate it. It wasn't. It was yes, I do think that she did represent a part of the
Yeah.
yearning
His
of the
past,
heart
yeah.
of what I don't know.
Yeah.
Thomas should answer that question.
Let's talk about The Brave, which you got great reviews for, and which I always think it's always interesting when performers will play. And I'm gonna say the full title here because it's so great. The Defense Intelligence Agency Deputy Director. I mean, that's a heck of a title.
Deputy Director of Defense.
Right,
Intelligence. I was like,
yeah.
if I can say it, if I can make it sound smart, or if I can say it, then I will be as smart as she is. So yes, I'll take the part.
I mean, that's and the thing about that part is like what I loved. You had a quote about her where you said, personal feelings are not. I'm sorry, this is actually about Chicago PD, but I'm talking about Patricia Campbell. I'm sorry, where she's same thing. But to be the head of the intelligence like that, it's like on a show that is sort of you're kind of driving that bus in some ways,
I'm
right?
curious.
Yeah.
Personal feelings are not
Yeah.
what?
What's that?
Personal feelings are not what?
Okay, so that's about
Sure, it's similar.
Chicago
They're
PD,
similar
right?
women, though.
Right. So the quote is there is about personal things are not Brennan's priority. I mean, that is your character on Chicago PD.
It's the same for Brett.
Same kind of idea, but there's a toughness to both of those women. I think that they're kind of bookends in some ways, right?
It's not a toughness, although I think that's a shorthand for saying that to witness in women this ability for them to make decisions that aren't based in emotion. That's what that's talking about.
Yeah.
Where we're used to or we're more comfortable with understanding women. The women make the decisions that are more heartfelt. We understand, we process it through our emotional systems, and then whether or not that decision, and men don't. And so it's a quality that we see as being tough because this woman is doing it, but it's not. Women are called to be a responsible party in a certain act of their lives in the job that they do. We're just not used to seeing them. It's not that it's tough, it's that their ability to understand thoughtfully and through their emotional process what it is to be able to make a decision that doesn't land within that emotion, doesn't ignore that emotion, but takes into consideration the bigger picture, the higher consciousness of what the decision is that needs to be made. And we're not used to seeing women be that way. And that's why that's one of the fun things about being able to portray women like that. It's like, it's not a masculine or a tough quality. It is a feminine, emboldened by her strength and her ability and desire to serve.
Right, and just the level of authority that you bring to it. It's terrific and remarkable. Let's talk about Hour of Lead, which you're doing obviously also with Thomas Jane. You guys are still filming to the degree. You got some stuff to go. Peter Fasinelli is the writer and director. Talk to us about Hour of Lead, which will be coming out end of the year, right? I believe, yeah.
If we ever get it finished, it is the longest shooting independent film of all time. I'm not complaining. It's what got Thomas to come here. But yes, Our Letter is an interesting movie where it truly is about one of the fun things about being able to act with. Is he like jumping? Is his like Find Waldo? I don't know. Maybe he wants to come up. It's fun to be able to return to work with another artist because you have experienced something on Hung. We enjoyed working together, but to be able to come back now 7 years later, which is funny because Peter wrote it 7 years ago.
Oh, interesting.
And be able to then you're leaping off from a different place as artists because of what your belief and understanding of the other is. So you get to even you coast through that part. and get to doing something that's really unique. And I think in this movie we're doing something that is that we haven't known has been done before, which is we're telling two movies at the same exact time based on perspective. So how you see the movie one way, a family goes in, they're going camping, their daughter gets lost in the first 5 minutes. Is it an abduction? Is it what happens? And that journey, or it's a couple who goes into the woods, they find a daughter, and what happens if you see it from a different perspective? If God's talking and the helicopter comes down and shoots you in the head, then you don't explain any further what the movie's about, and you can wait to see it.
That's Thomas Jane distracted from the plot.
And that's that.
Yeah, and that's that. Well, I'm sure you guys are going to be finishing up wrapping soon. I can't wait to see the film. If anybody has any questions, shoot up a hand, and we have a couple of moments for questions. Did that gentleman in the hat have a question? Yes. Yeah.
What time's our flight?
Well, I'm going to wrap up by just saying that's. Is there a question there? Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sure.
Can I borrow your microphone? Just because I'm in the front and so people can hear me. I have to go back to Another World because we're two of the biggest fans of Another World. As recently,
Martinimovie.com.
As recently as a week before it was announced you were here, I watched clips on Another World at work when I need some levity in my life. But you were on Another World for 4 years, I believe, and in the latter part of your years, you played the characters very differently from the beginning part of your years. Do you see the transition in your own work? Because it's really the education of Anne Heche in those 4 years. And you said before talked about your education, but you took characters that were written a certain way and you transformed them into two leading, strong women characters. Do you see that transition in yourself? If you go back and look at those, do you recognize that?
Oh, very specific. I mean, that was my big trick, I was like, well, what happens if this good girl, bad girl thing goes away and they both become like full-on like human beings and they aren't any longer defined by this good girl, bad girl thing. And to be recognized for doing that is very amazing because, yes, they both became, and one, they had to, first of all, grow into the other's ability to see the other side of themselves, the flip side, and then become the women that they were independently of being twins. And that was my journey. I think I even told Thomas this story on the plane or something. He said, "Did it work?" And I said, "Well, I got an Emmy for it, so I guess." But I don't think it's ever been described by that. Or certainly, I've never been able to hear that, and that was so long ago. That means a lot to me. And that's that is a part of my. That's a part of what I think I do as a woman who comes to see different characters. They're often embedded in this one side of themselves, and what I try to do is bring up the fullness. There's not a good side or a bad side or a wrong or a right, or this one's on the left side of the tracks and this one's on the, like, they're all there. So where do we bring that woman up to, as you said, a leading lady, purposeful in not only telling the story that I'm being gifted to tell, but in the essence of the truth of a full human being who's here to figure out their own moment and what they are and give that the glory and the space and have that be the reflection instead of I'm judging that she's the bad girl, so you're going to see this interpretation of mine through the bad girl lens. And so it's very beautiful. Yes, it became a huge part of my work and really my goal for every woman to be a fully realized human being.
I don't think it can get any better than that. A fully realized human being, a leading lady, and someone who really brings all of that to all of her performances. Ladies and gentlemen, Anne Heche. Thank you very much.